Thanks for joining us for another week in our study of Luke. Now, what we want to start off here first is with a directed discussion. So, in a moment, I'm going to let you pause this video. We'll have a series of questions that are going to be up on the screen, and we've got a handout at the link right here so that you can click on it on your devices and be able to download a PDF copy on your mobile phone or your computer. My wife and I actually play this game every time we go shopping to see how much our grocery bill is going to be. Now, what we want to do is see that every single thing has a cost. Often things that we don't think about. For example, the gas to get to the store. Our time has a cost. Each one of these things has a cost, and ultimately it requires a commitment that has to be followed through regularly if we want to eat every single week. Now, let's take a look at our central text here, which is going to be from Luke. So take a moment here. The passage will be on the screen for you to read as a group. Now I want you to take a moment here, pause this video, and I want you to ask yourself a question. What in your life is taking a higher priority than Jesus? I'm sure there was a rousing discussion there. For me, I think ultimately my priorities, what I want with my career, what I want to accomplish, and those are things that often for me take a higher priority than Jesus. They're things that I struggle with on a day-to-day basis because it's very hard for me to trust God's will when I think I know exactly what I need to do. Now, in this passage here, I want you to examine three things. Number one, what were they doing? What did they leave? And who did they leave? Take a moment to discuss this amongst yourselves. Now, when we look at this here, your answers may have varied, but we see that ultimately they are in the middle of their careers and their livelihood. Right? This is how Jesus meets them. And so it's important to understand what they were doing and whom they were doing it with, and then measure that against their response. They were willing to give up their careers and their livelihood and their resources and the relationship with their family, leaving their father there in the case of James and John to follow Jesus. Because we see that God is our heavenly Father and that He will provide all of the resources and He will sustain us in ways that others just can't. I want to take a moment here to share a story. There was this crossroads of sort where there was the cafeteria, there was the English department building, and then there was the Baptist Collegiate Ministry, and it was kind of formed a T. And this was the not an unofficial center of campus, but for me the official center of campus for student life. It's kind of the middle of the small campus. And I remember that while I was at this crossroads, I was singing a hymn. Though none go with me, I still will follow. No turning back. No turning back. And I remember that song, maybe you remember that song as well, where that just resonated. And I realized that when you turn to follow Jesus, that there's no turning back. That was a key moment where I realized that discipleship is not only a momentary decision, but it is an ongoing and reoccurring decision on a daily basis. Now, I'll be honest that not every day do I think to myself, oh man, today I've got to give it all over again. But there are moments every day throughout my day where I realize that these are pivotal moments, and there are times in seasons of my life where I recognize, because as an adult I'm so habitual, I do the same thing over and over, so it's not necessarily as varied as in my youth. But I now see business decisions and life decisions. These things are of consequence and ultimately need to be consecrated by the Lord. So I need to go to Him in prayer and say, God, is this your will? Is this the direction you want my life to go? Because that's what a disciple does. Now I want us to take a few moments here, and I want us to ask a series of questions that you'll have up here on the screen. And I'm going to ask them and give you a chance to talk about them. So what I want you to do is really ask this question. What is the appropriate response to a request from a person of influence in your life? The next question I want you to ask is, give some examples of when you would not wait to help your friend. Next question here. Go ahead and turn the scenario around and ask what you would expect a friend to do for you if you were in that same situation. Our last question for discussion here is ask each other and go around the room how it would feel if someone didn't help you quickly. Well, good job with those questions. One of the things that you'll see as you're looking at this is that we all have expectations, don't we? Sometimes they're not verbalized, they're not vocalized, but they're there nonetheless. And maybe I may be in the course of looking at all these things, and when you'd wait, we're often more pragmatic with our time than when we're not in duress than when we are in duress, right? We expect, others to wait for us to help. But often when we're in duress, we expect others to help us immediately. And it's funny when we start to look at that, how our perspective changes. Now, the last question I had you do is, what would you feel like if someone didn't help out quickly? Well, I want to share two stories here. I remember that when I was in college, I got a little bit of financial debt. Now, as an adult, it wasn't that much money, but at the time, it was a bit of money that I couldn't afford, and made some unwise decisions for the right reasons, but I spent, the wrong amount of money. And so I remember when, the credit cards start getting due and money was tight, no one helped me out. It's funny that some had given me advice saying, hey, listen, you should save up the money before you buy it, use what you got. And I was pretty frustrated because I was hoping that someone would come in and save the day, and it didn't work like that. Now, there's a longer part of this story, but I'll just stop and say this. I was frustrated and disappointed because no one ran to help me immediately. And I thought, man, I wish someone would come in and save the day. Now, it built character in my life, and it taught me a huge lesson on how to manage my resources. But it also taught me empathy, where when someone's in those kind of troubles, you don't just need money to get out, you need wisdom. See, I lacked wisdom. I thought I needed money, but what I really needed was wisdom. And people had ran to me to give me wisdom, and I foolishly went and spent the money. Now, let me tell you a positive story here. When I was going to my first pastorate or youth pastorate at Emmanuel Baptist Church in Morgan City, this was the summer of 1996. I was a 18-year-old freshman in college, and I was driving between Thibodaux and Morgan City on this sort of swampy road, and all of a sudden a piston went through my engine. Now, I didn't know how to change my oil, and I now know how to change my oil, but I'm sitting here stranded at this road. I'm going here for the summer. I'm going to live there for the summer. And I'm stranded in a place where, you're waiting for Swamp Thing to come out and attack you, or, some other mythical creature to just kind of creep out of the swamp and suck you in. I was a little scared, and maybe my imagination was a little wild at the time. But I remember this gentleman pulled over, and came up. Now, I was a little nervous because here I'm on the side of the road and I have no idea who this person is. At the time, I didn't know who it was. And he came up, and I recognized him as a deacon from my home church at University Baptist Church. And I was so relieved to see him. I didn't know him very well, but I knew he was a believer. I knew he was a servant leader. He came, he picked me up, he helped us get the tow truck to get my vehicle, and he gave me a ride home. And he had things to do, but he was willing to give up time in his day and sacrifice his schedule so that way I could get home safely. Made a huge impact on me that he didn't let the inconvenience of service prevent him from showing the love of Christ. And Jesus says about discipleship, if you want people to know that you're my disciples, love one another. And I saw that in broad daylight, plain as day, when he took time to stop and help a stranger. And nowadays we're so afraid of helping everyone because they might hurt us. And that's not an unfair statement here. That those are real concerns and fears. But what's exceptional about him is that he did not let that become an excuse to not serve the Lord, and through his acts of service, bless me and influence me in a tremendous way. Well, as we are wrapping up today, I want us to take home a few questions here. What are some of the costs of following Jesus? What in your life have you counted as greater than Jesus? Paul says that he's counted everything as loss for the surpassing knowledge of Christ Jesus, his Lord. What are the things in your life that are getting in the way today? Give yourself the honest answer. Don't try to impress anyone. Don't try to lie to yourself or deceive yourself and convince yourself that everything's okay. There are always things in our life that are getting in the way. By the way, that's okay. Let me say that. It's okay to not be okay. And I want you to take a moment and really think about that. What we're going to do is we're going to pray for everybody, and then we're going to hang out a little bit. So if you do want to talk, certainly come and hang out and we'll chat. Well, that's it for this lesson. Don't forget to take a moment and pray for each other before you head out. And if you want to talk, our facilitator will be available. Thanks so much for joining us in this session throughout the book of Luke. We'll be back next week with another great lesson. Have an awesome week.